Hello and welcome to the Wild Wild West podcast. My name is Richie Riche of the MHRT Network. Over this way, representing his Los Angeles Chargers, is DZ. And we have an announcement for DZ as well over the course of the show here, which is a big one, a new and exciting one as well. And down below, we have Monsieur Jack Hanna representing his Las Vegas Raiders. And obviously, we have a special guest, as we announced for you last show. We're going to get into all things ref and call it, refs and calls and that sort of thing, and talk about, all those sorts of things. It's really the other pillar of the game, which is the making sure that we are in fact watching the game of football. That's what the rules are, and that's what the refs are ultimately there to make sure that we're all watching every given or any given Sunday, as they say. It's such an important piece. So with that in mind, I am going to quickly bring in our guest so we don't have him waiting in the back room any longer. But we will go through some introductions of the guest, have him give a little rundown who he is, how we got into what he did in the past, and we will go from there. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ref Guru to the show. Let's give him a round of applause.
Welcome, Ref Guru.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, brother.
Welcome, Ref. Nice of you to join the show for the first time here on the Wild Wild West. Just wanted to thank you for joining the show and taking the time out of your day. I know that it's jam-packed, so I appreciate you doing it. And just wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Mic issues?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's got mic issues.
Yeah, now you lost your audio.
And while we're waiting, Sacktown, Rosetown, ASAP. Good to see all you guys in the chat.
All right, I'm wondering if we have a mic issue. Now, your mic was working beautifully in the green room prior to the show. I wonder if it's a setting.
You kick him out and then bring him back in. Maybe that might work.
All right, Ref, I'm gonna knock you from the studio. If you want to re-click the link to come back in, and we'll see if that resets your mic. Okay. Oh, he left on his own. Okay.
What's up, JD?
So with that in mind, let's just quickly jump in and cover off the news we were going to do after Ref introduced himself. DZ, please share with the Wild Wild West crew here that we have with us, for those that are live and those that are going to be joining us later.
Well,
your news.
Yeah. Well, team news or my personal news. Well, I decided to start my own channel.
That news.
Oh, that news. Channel is built up with DZ. It's brand freaking new, and I'm learning because this YouTube thing is a little more complicated than I thought. I've primarily been in construction my whole life, so the technology I know is my iPhone and the laptop. So still working out the bugs. Kind of excited. I'd like to do something similar to kind of what this show does. Obviously we'll just piggyback off this like Captain Jack does and MHRT. And then I would like to do interviews and just talk primarily Chargers on not Wednesday nights, and highlight other things. Ref Guru back in. Let's see if his mic.
Congratulations, DZ.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Ooh, there we go.
I don't know what
that
happened. Not like it's my first rodeo on
that is crisp.
So I apologize for that, for holding up your show. I don't know what happened. I don't know if maybe my cat ate my Ethernet cable. I'm not really
That's
sure.
all right.
All right,
Smart
so
using Ethernet.
catch me up if I need caught up, and then let me know what you want.
Can
So
you
we
go
just
ahead and
announced
introduce us?
DZ started his own channel.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Rich.
So we just want you to introduce yourself and
Okay.
who you are, what you did and how you got into it, and then we'll kind of jump into the rest of the show from there.
Sounds good. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate that very much. My name in real life is David Grant. I adopted the Ref Guru officiating logo many, many moons ago, going on almost 20 years now. I started officiating in 2004. I started like everybody else starts out with your local association doing YFL, went up to junior varsity to junior college, Division One, and I was working through the system. I was put into, at the time, the NFL development program in 2008. It was not called the Mackey Development Program at that time. It was not anywhere near as sophisticated as it is now. Back then, it was kind of like, oh, Mike Pereira thinks you're pretty good. We're going to put you in, quote, the system. Once you were in the system, then generally you were considered to be on the NFL's radar. I dropped off a little bit on the radar in 2010, some of it for personal family reasons. I had to step back from officiating a little bit. And, that cost me my spot in line, if you will, within, quote, the system. That's just how it is. You get lined up and it's next official up. And if you're not there, it's next official up after that. So no grudges there at all. It was just the way that it happened. But in 2012, I hadn't been on the field for almost 2 years, although I remained as a trainer and instructor, both locally and nationally, for officials that wanted to do individualized training. I always felt that I was a better trainer than on-field official. There's probably some folks that would have argued that, but I felt like other people's success was more important than mine. And I really felt like I could get folks to the next level if I just had the chance to work with them. And that's really where my passion was. I remember in 2009 talking to Pereira at camp, and I was like, Mike, I want to be on the administrative side. I want to be you in a sense, not necessarily vice president of officiating at the NFL, but I wanted to be a scout. I wanted to be the guy that would help develop new officials. Anywho, 2012, as you all know, the NFL locked out the officials, right? The collective bargaining agreement was not renewed, and the NFL had this brilliant idea that, well, we'll just get replacement officials. Well, we all know how that ended. And quite frankly, folks, let's be honest. If anybody thought that it was going to be any different than what it was, I'm not sure that you were paying attention, because I think everybody kind of felt that, where this was going. On the other hand, one of the referees who was going to be a replacement official was putting together his crew, and they were going to send the replacement officials to Atlanta and Dallas for the clinics to get ready for the regular season. And he hit me up and he said, hey, I'm putting together a crew to be a replacement official. And I said, well, that's nice. That sounds like a lot of fun. He says, I need a field judge, which is one of the positions on the field. And I said, well, that sounds good. Who do you want? He says, I want you. And I said, well, that sounds like a lot of fun, but I don't know if I want that t-shirt. And he said, you know what? Here's the deal. Everybody knows how this is going to go. He said, you've basically come off the field anyway, because honestly, anyone that crossed the picket line, your career was essentially over. There are some folks who wasn't that, but if you weren't eye winked, if you will, by the NFL that said, yeah, go ahead and go, and we'll let it slide. Anybody that went in there was eventually trash dumped and put on a scrap heap. You can ask anybody that's out there. I don't know if you've read Shannon Easton's book that she has out, Shannon's career. If you read Shannon's book, Lady Rep, it's a pretty good book. I mean, it's a personal book, but her and my career paralleled a lot with regards to how we were treated with regards to being an official, being a replacement rep. So anyway, I did the drill. And I wouldn't trade it for anything, because I'll tell you what, I don't care what you want to say. This is, of course, a long time ago now, but I don't care what they wanted to say about the replacement officials. And we knew what we were stepping into, but the training and the treatment and the paycheck that you got from that is irreplaceable. So what I did was, after that thing was over, I tried to leverage that. And I was basically, I was pretty much upfront with everybody. I said, look, I was a replacement rep. I own that. It is what it is. But what I tell people in clinics, I said, who remembers what Sean Payton, the current quarterback of the Denver Broncos, of course, former head coach with the Saints, etc. I said, what was he doing in 1987? And people look around going, I don't know. I said, he was a replacement quarterback for the Chicago Bears, crossed the picket line. I said, do you think anybody cares about that now? And most of them shake their head no. And my answer is, why? Because it's what he's done since then versus what it was then. And I said, that's the same thing for me. It's all about what I've tried to do since then, and not about what it was at the time. Did we get hate mail and all this other rocks through our window and all this other nonsense and hate, from the other officials and fans? Sure. But what are you going to do? So from my perspective, the training that we got and everything else that went with it is a lifetime experience. I wouldn't necessarily wish it on anyone, but in my case, I had nowhere to go anyway. So it wasn't like I was going to get back into the system. It wasn't like I was going to get back on the field. So I took my lumps and tried to turn it into something. That said, since 2012, I faded off a little bit, quite frankly, because I'm getting old and I've retired for the most part. But I still communicate with officials that I've made contact with over the years. They'll send me game footage of games that they're working, and we'll sit down and we'll do critiques. Because what I can communicate to officials now that really want to get somewhere is what you really need to know. The other officials only tell you what they want you to hear because they don't want you to take their spot. I don't have a spot to give up. So I load these guys. I say guys because they're male and female. I said, I load these officials up with what it is that they really need to know. And I think that that's what's different about my training versus training that they'll get somewhere else. And I work with rookies. I got folks that have never put on a uniform before. We talk about the uniform, what to buy, how to wear it, what you should do with it, what you should not do with it, all that type of stuff, all the way up to veteran wideouts that are trying to break into junior college or Division III or maybe even Division I. We look at their mechanics on the field. We look at their on-camera presence. We look about their communication skills. I quiz them about what is about your crew, your 5 officials or 7 officials, depending on how many are out there. What is it that makes your crew special? There's something about every crew that's special. And I challenge the referee or the white hat, the guy who's in charge of the crew. I challenge them to determine what it is about their crew that makes them special. You have to go, you have to own that. And so there's the integrity part of the game. You alluded to that in your pregame. Well, what's going on in Kansas City? Blah blah blah. There's a difference between amateur officiating, if you will. And I don't mean amateur in the sense that it's not good, but high school to a point where, they're all getting paid, but how much are you really getting paid? To the pros, where it's not so much a sport as much as it is entertainment. And so there's a clear line there between that. So I've tried to evolve with everything. I've tried to stay under the radar. I've tried to gain respect, one official at a time. In 2019, I met up with the guy that you all know, Wayne Mabry, also known as Violator. He's wears the 57 Raiders jersey with the spikes on it. And if you don't know Violators, Google him. You'll instantly know who it is. And I said, Wayne, I said, there's no fan-based football shows out there that are streaming that I know of. I said, I think the fans need a voice. I said, I think they want to know how the officiating really works. I said, I don't have any secrets. I don't have all the answers, but I don't have anything to hide. And so we started a live stream in 2019. And part of that was to talk about all of the games that were going to be happening that week, what we thought about it, what we didn't think about whatever matchup was going on. But then we would talk about officiating. So if there were particular calls during the week, we would discuss those because I've been on the field and we tried to train the fans to officiate, but not officiate solely on everything TV. And so throughout the course of the 6 years that we did NFL Nation Live, in some cases, we actually did videos to try to break down what actually was happening on the field rather than just discuss it in an open forum such as this, to try to give the fans a visual of what's actually happening. So we tried to make it real. We tried to make it tangible. And we tried to be transparent. We tried to take what we were being told on TV as what happened. We were trying to interpret what we weren't being told about what happened or didn't happen, whether the NFL was discussing it. And it was truths, half truths, BS. We weren't really sure sometimes, but we tried to walk everybody through that and try to give them a timeline of what's happening. I went to a Raiders game in Indianapolis in, I don't remember, 2018 or something. And I'm sitting in the airport, eating a Snickers bar, and I look across from me, and there's this crazy cat dressed over there in a pirate outfit. And I'm like, what in the fresh hell is this? So I walked over there. I said, excuse me. I said, you by any chance a Raiders fan? You here for the game? He goes, hello, I'm Captain Jack. I'm like, oh, very nice to meet you. So Captain Jack and I had met prior to even starting NFL Nation Live. And Wayne and I are sitting there in like 2020, 2021 going, man, we should bring Jack into the show. Is Jay Levy's actually his real name. I call him Jack. So Captain Jack joined our show a couple years into it. He was the wild card to our personas, if you will. Wayne and I are pretty straight. We're funny, but not, stage funny. Captain Jack is all over the place. And so he added the zippity doo-dah to our show. And in a sense, we still tried to keep it kid friendly. And then he would, when we would go through the different games, he would wear a different hat with some other different personality. The show, I kind of think, caught on culturally a lot like this show, because what we tried to bring in was relevant, important content, which is what you guys do, which is one of the things I love about this show, is the in-depth and expert analysis. On NFL Nation Live, we didn't really consider ourselves expert. We considered ourselves knowledgeable fans. So we kind of threw stuff over the fence, hoping it would stick. Some of it did, some of it didn't. So it was a serious show, but we tried to have some important information there. This year, because of everybody's schedule, Wayne's getting busier, and I'm getting busier with other projects. We actually merged our brand and platform into the Lockdown Defense platform. And so NFL Nation Live is an actual stream. You probably won't see Jay, myself, and Wayne week in and week out. So the good news about that is I don't have to produce a show every week. The bad news is those fans will have to make a choice maybe between where they want to spend their time. What we're hoping, and as the Wild Wild West show was picking up steam, we tried to promote everybody's platform, because we're all in this together. And whether we agreed or disagreed on the format wasn't the issue. We're talking football. We're bringing it. We're fans. We're doing this because we love to do it. And we tried really hard to promote all of that. So we joined Lockdown Defense, and I'll do periodic appearances during that platform's run during football season. If there's officiating to talk about, I doubt there will be, because they're all perfect. They're like 98%. So why should we even bother on any calls? But I'm sure there'll be something to talk about, and I'll try to bring as much transparency as I can to that. So I've wasted about 15 minutes of your show telling you a bunch of nothing, but that's me.
No, I'm glad you did.
Again, I just appreciate what you guys are doing. I've always loved this show, and for a good reason. It's good analysis. It's in-depth analysis. You guys know your stuff, and I think the fans are moving to that level. They've watched enough of these of the ESPN and all the pregame shows. Back in the day, Fox and them, they used to try to teach that. And I grew up in the broadcasting industry, and the thing was, well, they would often do their shows because, well, the fans aren't smart enough. Like, really? You're going to insult the fans? You're not going to cover this or that because you don't think they're smart enough? Well, Fox kind of came in and said, no, the fans are pretty smart, so we're going to do all this stuff. So Fox, I think, kind of elevated the whole fandom knowledge infrastructure. And they, then they added Mike Pereira. Then they started doing, well, hey, Mike, what's the call in the field kind of thing. So CBS and other folks tried to copy that. It doesn't always work. You maybe don't have the right talent. You got referees that are biased. I like Mike's approach because it's from an educational standpoint. But I just think Fox elevated it. Then shows like yourself, like Wild Wild West, what we try to do, the NFL Nation Live, I think we've expanded on that. We've given the fans another place to go that doesn't insult their intelligence. And I think they thrive on that. And I think they need that because week to week, Sunday to Sunday, you don't get any Fox News worth watching from a football standpoint. So that's where we come in, right? We take over between Sunday night or Monday night and Saturday night, and we give fans, we try to give fans what they want. And I've always enjoyed that about this show. We tried to do that on our show, and we'll do some of that on the Lockdown Defense show this fall.
Yeah, for those Broncos fans here, we also go live and stream live on our network here during the Broncos games, which gives some additional content as well, both some feedback, some additional elements there. And as you're alluding to, one of the other things that you'll often get, some of the commentary, not all of it, but some of it, is somewhat condescending during games in terms of the announcers. And I'm sure, as Raiders fans, Chargers fans, and maybe less so Chiefs fans, because there's certainly a bit of fandom going on a little bit more when the Chiefs are playing, I find. But there's definitely a skewed approach to some of the announcers in terms of how they speak about the various teams that can be, I actually like the word you used, rather insulting to the fan base when they're watching.
It can be.
Games.
I think it can be.
Yeah, and I think the challenge is that as a casual fan, you don't necessarily pick up on it as much if all you're there to say, hey, that's cool. But then once you've gotten yourself to a certain level of knowledge about the game and the team and how the sausage is made, so to speak, you start hearing the comments and you're just like, who do you think you are? and you want to jump through the screen and give them a good reason why they should stop it. And it gets very frustrating. So we offer, at least on this network, and I know there are others throughout all different fans and teams who go live and stream and can be a secondary option for announcing the games and giving you feedback.
I think it's brilliant, and the broadcasting folks have folks that they have to cater to, right? Players that they need to pay attention to, and we don't have to do that. If we didn't like something that we saw, we didn't like, the way the center put the ball down, or he flips it around when he puts it on there and wants the laces going the other way, we're going to pick up on that. Do you think you're ever going to hear the whys about that? No, you will on this show. I guarantee you. I've heard you talk about stuff, Rich, that I was thinking, wow, I never thought of that. And I think it's, all of you get credit for that. From that standpoint, but you guys know your teams. I'd like to say that I'm a Raiders fan too. I don't know football like you guys know football. After listening to you, I thought I knew football. I thought, you know what? I can break down a 4-3 defense, a 3-4 defense, and I can tell you this, that, and the other thing. Now, listen to you guys go, I don't know crap. So I really enjoy the detail that you guys get to. You guys talk about positions and depth and why that's important, who can move from one place to the next. And there's just, all you can do is just eat that up if you really want to know what's going on. So I think I'm glad that there's places for fans to go to hear that. And I'm glad that you guys are helping to lead the charge on that, because I think it's needed. And I do agree with you, Rich. It's a value add to what we haven't had before. And I think it's terrific.
Yeah, I do too. It's a great alternative for fans of the show. You can also keep up with your favorite fanalists in terms of on and off. From time to time, I do join the live there, although I typically have family engagements during games that I have to corral kids and dogs, so I typically don't.
Yeah.
But I will jump in from time to time, and I obviously dive into a lot of Raiders shows and other shows as well. But with regards to kind of getting deeper into things, you did bring up an interesting comment in your preamble there in terms of your introduction, and that was, I mean, you said it. I didn't even need to bring it up as a question. That there is a definite difference between, I'll say high school, officiating and the NFL, for example. Not just the caliber of players or the size of the players, for that matter, because I mean, even that's a big difference. But also in the fact that you're dealing with a much higher element of entertainment value and the requirement of being entertaining while you're on the field or while you're officiating, not just officiating. There's more to it than just like the basics. Um, I know we had briefly discussed that, the three of us, as a general concept that we wanted to get into. Like your feedback on that to distinguish the difference, and then as a secondary piece, is college becoming an even larger differentiator from high school now as a result of perhaps the same thing as the NFL?
Yeah, those are great topics. I wish this was a 12-hour show because, man, we could really have a lot. We could have a lot of fun with those three. Let me address. I'll try to remember all of those. I feel like a political guy at a debate. I'll try to remember all your questions. But the last one, with regards to the college or NCAA, everything at the NCAA level, if you will, particularly Division I, is changing faster than we can keep up with it. Just look at what happened with the Pac-12, right? They went to the
Pac-12?
I know they went to like the Pac 2.5 or whatever, and I know a lot of those officials. Dave Coleman is the director. He was I was with him in Dallas with the NFL. And so that's a whole different dynamic. I mean, that was the Pac-8, that was the Pac-12 or the Pac-10. Then it was the Pac-12. It wasn't, I don't think, ever a super conference compared to maybe in football with regards to, maybe the SEC or something. And then they just blew it up. And so what happened to all their officials? The crews were decimated because all the, quote, good officials, if you will, got sucked up by the Big Ten. So the big power play there. So now the Pac, whatever they are, 2.26, whatever they are, they had to scramble to say, how, are we going to, and then they weren't even if you will, a bona fide conference from a playoff standpoint. So now they got to play games against the Mountain West or whatever. Well, whose officials are you going to use? So it turned out that the old the Pac-12, if you will, officials that were, quote, left over or essentially abandoned because the Big Ten came in and took the Big Four schools, whatever, and took the officials they wanted. So basically the officials that were left over were like, hey, what up? And are we mincemeat? And to a certain extent, from the football perspective, as to your point, the answer was yeah. Why? Because big time college football now has aligned themselves with the NFL's development program. Again, in 2008, the development program was like, yeah, you're in the system. We'll keep an eye on you. It was grassroots. It was like, oh, hey, what have you been doing since last August? Now they're watching you every step of the way. What are you doing drinking Diet Coke over there? You're not supposed to eat Cheetos with that. So you can't make any kind of a move now in big time college football without some sort of scrutiny. The competition for the Mackey development program is huge. And it's really such a commercialized program now that you almost have to have your own Neil to get in. And so it's big time money. It's big time sports. I'd say where the difference is, which is a part of your other question, is that in college, in my opinion, y'all, they're still making calls for the most part based on the game action. In the NFL, it's like, this play can be reviewed. I'm not going to call it a touchdown. Let replay decide if it's a touchdown or not. And I think that cheats the game. I think you need to officiate the game that you see on the field and you call it. I don't care what replay can do, would do, should do, could do. Officiate the damn game and then we'll figure it out from there. Now they're taught to say, well, don't call that because replay can't overturn it if you do that. That is nonsense.
You're talking about where they'll call the touchdown and then
yeah, because they'll be like, oh well, if we call it a touchdown, it's not a touchdown. They won't. I mean, they might not overrule it or whatever, or
right.
So, but they got into this whole mess because they're like, well, there has to be indisputable evidence. 4 million fans can see there's indisputable evidence, but you don't change
20
it.
20 cameras also.
Yeah, or 400 cameras. So, as a side note, I would put in there that while this league is still trying to get going, there's another spring league that is developing in parallel with the UFL. It's called the American Spring Professional Football League. And we expect to kick off next spring. Well, I am the director of officiating for the ASFL. And
wow,
does that put me on par with Dean Blandino and all those other people? No, but and that's fine. But at the same time, it does put me in a position to hire, train, and do the things that we're talking about on this show, and in our training for folks that want to move up and do spring pro football. That'll be one of the things. You will officiate the game on the field. Replay is not going to be there to bail you out. It's not going to be there to be over your shoulder. It is to fix what didn't get fixed on the field. We're not going to unfix or try to fix something that should have been on the field that you should have called. They got this thing all messed up. It's a bummer, but we got ourselves into this. And look, I've got all the replay history that you all need, going all the way back to 1988. When I first had discussions with Tex Schramm, the Dallas Cowboys, about instant replay. That's a whole nother show. But I've been around long enough to see this whole thing. And since I've got into an officiating, it's a bummer. I think college, back to your question, Rich, I think college does a better job with that. But we're seeing the needle get pushed a little bit towards the NFL in the way that they want to do things. And part of that is because you've had former officials, Bill Carollo, et cetera, that have taken over as directors of some of these major conferences. So they're aligning themselves internally with the best practices of NFL, and they're teaching those protocols all the way down. And that's not a bad thing totally, but it's very difficult to get all these directors, if you will, all on the same page with everything. And then that affects your consistency. So there's a lot of things with regards to your loaded question, but I do think the NFL bends towards entertainment. I think the downside of that is that the officiating bends itself towards, well, we should do this because we might have some other result. And I think that's wrong. I think you need to officiate the game on the field. With regards to college, lower levels under Division I, everything is, I would say, still pretty much normal. It's not as organized. It's not as not quite as political, but it's also more spread out. So while the big conferences all have their teeth in all of these programs all over the United States, the MAC, NAIA, all these other schools, they don't have the resources. They don't necessarily have all the officials and training they need. So it's much more of a grassroots effort. But that's where the next level or group of officials are going to come from. But there's just kind of a breakdown in the training there. When you get into, you can multiply that by a factor of about 4 or 5, and that's what you end up with in high school. High school is still very regionalized. Yeah. With regards to, the talent, expectations, training, everything's back to the local associations in the general area. Some folks, like in Southern California, where it's fairly robust. I've seen areas in Minnesota where they're like, we don't have enough officials. We can't, some teams had to forfeit their high school games because there weren't enough officials. So the high school level is very, very regionalized and clustered, such that I think that without a national program, which I think they should have done with USA football, but it never really got off the ground, we could have fixed a lot of that. But I think they missed the boat by not getting the junior Mackey development program, if you will, integrated at the high school level. I think we could have done it, but it's tough. The local politics, believe it or not, make it tough. In some cases, the local associations don't want anything to do with the NFL. If the NFL came in and said, we want to help train your officials, they'd be like, get out of here.
Ref Guru, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
You said something a few seconds ago about like it's high school sports is kind of regionalized with reffing and things like that. Like Minnesota, you said sometimes they have to forfeit games. I'm sure that happens throughout the country. Do you think there's a lack of interest in reffing going on right now in all sports? And I have a reason. If you're saying there is, do you think that parents maybe get involved too much at those levels and maybe people don't want to deal with that?
I think you nailed it on both points. I think there is a shortage, and I think that shortage is because the local associations don't put the effort in that's necessary to retain new officials. For example,
okay,
one of the favorite things in Southern California, and this is fairly true throughout, is they take the new official and they throw him out on a youth football game all by themselves. No help from anybody, because they think throwing you into the deep end of the pool with 2 anchors or 2 blocks chained to your feet is the best way to teach you how to swim. So they go out there, they get beat up because the kids don't know how to play football. So the kids are all over the place. The ref has the responsibility of the game, which they can't control because the kids are all over the place. The coaches are yelling at them. The parents are yelling at them, and they quit. And my solution to that for our local association was, when I become president of this association, no official under 2 years experience will go to any game without a mentor.
That sounds
because if you had a mentor official on a sideline, a veteran official who was interfering in what I mean by interfering with the abuse. In other words, he would talk to the coaches. He would tell them what's going on, so that the rookie ref could actually referee and do his job. They would hold the parks department, the administrator, whoever's in charge of the gate, if you will. They would hold those agencies accountable to the behavior of the parents. But it's exactly what you said. It's a breakdown in philosophy, politics, infrastructure, and resources. And when you have all of those things collapse on top of the officials, they're just going to walk away because it's not worth the money.
And you made up a good point about, how kids don't understand how to play football. And when you have, let's just say, poor reffing in any sport, you kind of are robbing these kids of some sort of development, because we're assuming the coaches, all know what they're doing, when, maybe these guys are new, or they don't. And, so if games aren't called correctly or to the best of the refs, knowledge, these guys go on to the next game, and maybe they're playing in another division against people who actually know how to ref,
Exactly. So and it's a massacre, right?
Yeah.
Actually,
and who gets blamed for that?
I would quickly interject real quick, just modify what you said, because I think it's exactly what you're getting at, but I think there's just a slightly better way of kind of framing it. The refs need to be able to officiate the game to a specific standard. As in, they can't, as in, and this is, I think, what Ref was hinting at with regards to the mentor on the field, is to ensure that there's a standard that is kept on the field, which then allows both the young officiator, or even a newer officiating crew member there, or developmental person, to not feel that they are out over their skis and thrown into the deep end and then kind of spiral out and leave. But then on the flip side of that, you don't then hinder the development of the local kids, because there's kind of a basement, if you will, in terms of like there's a certain level that the game is always kept to, because the mentor is there to kind of act as the backstop, if you will, to ensure that the game is kind of kept to a certain level. So I didn't want to cut you off, but I think
No,
that
it's
was
fine.
generally what we were kind of what the attempt was there, because I think that kind of hits the nail on the head.
I would agree, and I think I would sum that up just by saying I don't think either side, the the people that provide the facilities, the teams, the youth football league, and the officials association, none of those groups meet and talk about meeting or handling expectations. And so everybody goes out there on Saturday and nobody knows exactly what you said, Rich. Nobody knows the goal. Nobody understands that they're all on the same page. If you got these folks together and you had the officials meet with the coaches, meet with the players and say, hey, quarterback, don't snap the ball until I give the ready for play whistle. I mean, because they're learning too, right?
Yeah.
But if you set expectations for everybody at that level, think how much better they'll be when they get to junior high. And then they'll go to high school and go, yeah, I remember that from YFL. We don't snap the ball until the referee gives us the ready for play. I mean, little stuff like that makes a big difference. So you don't end up with reteaching everyone what's going on. So I think you're right, Rich. Managing expectations is one of the big factors there in being able to make the whole system work.
So that leads me to a question. Since Guru, you said there's one official initially, now two. So when does that stop? Like, when do you start getting, more officials on the field? And like, at what age? Is it like junior high? Is it high school? Or is it just straight college at that point?
Yeah, that's a really good question, but I'll answer it. But the short answer is you get more officials when they start paying.
Right.
I mean, you could have 7 officials at a YFL game if they pay for it, but they don't. So the answer to your question is, generally speaking, the minimum to run a football game is 2. I mean, you need a referee and you need what they call the head linesman, which is now in the NFL, the down judge, right? The person running the chains, right? That may go away if they do the whole digital football thing, but you need a minimum of 2. Generally, in YFL, you're going to get 2. You don't really see much of a change until you get to JV ball. JV ball, depending on the size of the schools and the associations, either 3 or 4. So you're going to have a referee, a head linesman, which is your base 2, right? Then you're going to add a line judge. The 4th would be the umpire. So the umpire is technically expendable, if you will, from the payroll in a JV game. They just expect the referee to do all the ball spotting. But when you get to JV, you're going to have 3. The kid's a little bit bigger, a little bit faster. You can't get to the sidelines because if you're a line judge, you're only on one side of the field. Well, your referee can't cover the other side line for JV ball. They're too big. They're too fast, if you will. You can do that in Pee Wee football because if your ref can't outrun your running back, then that's a whole nother set of problems. But and then when you get to varsity, I've never seen varsity with less than 5 officials.
Yep.
Okay, so you have your base 2, you had your line judge, your umpire, and your back judge, and that's your crew of 5. And almost all high schools will have 5. For the same reasons you had 2 or you added the 3rd one for JV. Bigger, faster, you need coverage on the sidelines. They're going to throw the ball more down the field, so you need the back judge. Oftentimes in Pee Wee ball, the tight end's not really a factor. In high school, the tight end could be a factor, so you need the back judge back there to help with coverages and spotting the ball and punt coverages and things like that. And then you generally don't see the other 2 officials to make 7, which is your field judge, side judge, which are downfield with the back judge, but on the sidelines, or essentially they're downfield from the line judge, down judge, until you get to college. And they've been running 7-person crews down to the JV level for more than 20 years. So when I broke into JV ball in 2007, they had only been running 7-people crew for like 1 year. And the colleges didn't want to pay for the extra 2 people, but the officiating association said, look, you'll get better quality, you'll get better communication, blah, blah, blah. And there's still 7 folks out there. I'm not sure that at the lower college levels, JC, Division III, Division II, that they got what they were promised from the associations. But I can tell you that I moved up because of my mechanics ability, but also my ability to communicate with coaches. I had a unique way of communicating with coaches. And once the coaches finally say to the director, I want him on my game, you're just on the rocket to the moon at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. So before we go into any more questions, I do want to bring up, we got a super chat here that we're going to go ahead and bring on screen.
Navman.
So this is Navman. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So this is obviously directed towards you, Ref. I'll give you the moment to read the on-screen text here, and we can go from there.
Nah. Next question. No, actually,
Okay,
that's a
sure,
really good
no
question.
problem.
No, that's actually a really good question.
Well, let's read it. Hey, let's read it. So, hey, Ref Guru, your opinion. Do you believe that the top tier teams tend to get the better of the doubt when close calls and those teams? Sorry, I'm on my phone, so it's small
That's
and
okay.
hard to read.
Yeah, it's okay.
I wear glasses. Those teams are lesser tier. Secondly, thanks for the education. And I got a question after this one.
Yeah,
and clearly you need
that's
your
a great
glasses.
and that's
That
a great
wasn't even it
question.
at
Thank
all.
you for that, and I'm glad you're getting something out of this. The short answer is sort of. Actually, it's not really yes or no. It's not that there's an intent for, like you say, top tier teams to get better calls than teams that are not top tier. But what the better teams get are the more experienced crews than the other teams. The NFL has total control over who's officiating, what position they're in, what crew they're going to be assigned to, and what games they're going to work. And so when I say the answer is sort of, what happens is that when you have crews that don't have the same levels of experience as another crew, while the NFL will generally give every crew as many, quote, good games as you can, the reality is that's just not going to happen, because as the weeks go on, the crews are getting rated. The officials are getting rated individually. They're getting rated as a crew. The white hat, the referee, is getting rated with his crew and his ability. So as the season goes on, you start seeing the separation. You know, in one of the things we talked about, Rich, you remember in NFL Nation Live, one of the stats we talked about of whether or not we were going to put teams on the clock was their scoring. You know, if they're not scoring enough points, you're on the clock. If you're not 350 some odd points or higher, you're not going to make the playoffs. And so the same thing happens with the crews. As the teams start going 4-12, that doesn't mean you won't have a quote a good crew, because the NFL would argue that all the crews are good. Well, so the end result is we get this false positive that, hey, some of these calls are going better for the Chiefs than they are for the Browns. Well, just in some cases that might very well be true, but it's not on purpose. It's mostly just because of what it is, which is crew experience.
So that kind of led me. So in watching your shows with Captain and Violator, and then, just from, this question here, do you, since the crews are kind of handpicked from what it sounds like, you mentioned biased earlier. So are certain crews kind of biased to certain teams based on, the guy who's picking, the guys that work with them?
You mean like the Raider rule?
Right.
Yeah, right. And I was the first to break that on NFL Nation Live, that's actually a real thing. I would have never believed that if I hadn't heard it my own self. But I think that I don't think you'll ever get rid of a complete team bias per se. The NFL goes to extraordinary lengths to keep that from happening. For example, if you live in, I'm just going to say northern Illinois, if you will. You're not going to work a Bears game unless they go to the Super Bowl and you're on a Super Bowl crew, because they don't want you biased towards the Chicago Bears. They go to great lengths to keep people from working games in their area. However, it's odd that Tony Corrente worked a lot of Charger games or whatever. So there's conspiracy theorists out there about that. There's folks that keep track of that, actually. But I think that back in the day, and when I say back in the day, I'm talking let's go at least from the merger forward to 1999, 2000. Yeah, that was definitely a cultural thing. There's no doubt about it. And there were a lot of reasons for that. Players would piss officials off. Coaches would piss officials off. Owners would piss officials off. The commissioner would piss people off. The taxi cab driver, whatever. They ordered decaf coffee. They got a hot dog at halftime. And so there's a lot of reasons why there was a lot of that going on. As time has gone on, you see less and less of that because there's not the hand-me-down that used to be there. Red Cashin was great at being able to give his officials a nudge towards, hey, Kansas City's a pretty good football team. Raiders, and so while there's still some nepotism in the league, and that probably will never go away,
we are human.
I feel like we're seeing less and less of that bias towards some teams. Will we ever get rid of it? No. Will we ever prove it that it's there? No. But you can't argue the way some of these calls go. And I think that the bigger conspiracy here in terms of the bias really isn't from the officials itself. It's from the NFL, because here's what broke right around 2009, when the NFL kind of started to move from being, in my opinion, a legitimate sport to being entertainment. As Wayne and I often said, we're one folding chair away from being the WWE.
When did they register that, ref? When were they ever a registered sport and then they changed it to a registered entertainment industry?
Well, not officially, but if you look back, you'll see where they started referring to themselves as entertainment.
Yeah.
Well, when you refer yourself to entertainment, where's the integrity go? Because now they can make it whatever they want it to be. Oh, don't look over here. It's not what you see over here. It's over, and so that's where the discussion became, is what about the officials? Well, when they started talking about full-time officials or not, that starts to get scary, because when you talk about bias, the good news was we had some bias, but the officials were like, hey, I'm an independent contractor. Don't mess with me. I'm going to make whatever call I want to make, and tough if you don't like it. To the NFL moving towards entertainment, saying, we want you to officiate the game like this. Look at Max Crosby, held on every play. Does he get called? No. Why? Well, it's entertainment. We don't want to slow the game down with a bunch of flags. They've gone from, it's not holding if the play goes the other way. Right. For example, if the ball's in the middle of the field and the quarterback, the offense, if you're looking at your TV screen, the offense is moving from right to left.
Yeah.
And the ball, and you're watching on TV, the quarterback takes the ball, turns, hands the ball off, the running back comes towards you. Okay. Then the right tackle doesn't have holding, because the play was away from him.
Correct.
Even if he was holding.
Correct.
Right. Now they've gone to, well, I don't know. Was it holding? Well, yeah, but and then you've got the Kansas City Chiefs guys moving 3 seconds before the ball snaps. I'm like, what is going on here? So we've gone from this
Jawan Taylor.
You've gone from this situation where are we biased to now we're just flat out cheating because we're telling the refs the way we want to manage the game. And that's the problem. While I didn't like the bias, I appreciated the fact that the officials were their own guys, so to speak, if you will. Now the cluster of officials are, you officiated our way or the highway. And so now all the officials are like, yes, sir. So they call it how they're told to call it, which isn't necessarily the way we would train you to call it. But that's when you get into the nuances of, well, I don't want to call it a touchdown because if I call it a touchdown, they can't overrule it if they decided that it really wasn't a touchdown because there wasn't enough evidence to overrule a touchdown. So I'm just not going to call it and I'll make replay call it. I'm like, dude, where have we gone from actually officiating a game to just making it look like we got guys in stripes running around out there blowing whistles, throwing flags when everyone else can see that it's not what it is? But so do we have
problem
bias
with that though too?
Yeah. Do we have bias? No. Do we have the appearance of bias? Yes, because of the way we're running the show now.
Yeah,
so it's a different
of
kind of bias. It's just been relabeled as something else.
But it's interesting you say that, right? Because if I'm not mistaken, you can absolutely, completely correct me if I'm incorrect, if I'm totally dead wrong on this. I'm almost positive, though, the NFL's direction to the officiating crews, just unilaterally across the board, and certainly in the messaging that I've heard directed towards the fan base, is the league and the replays will basically lean towards the call or non-call on the field. And I think you use the word incontrovertible or obvious evidence in replay. And it has to be like blatant, like as in like knock you over the head. And the problem that you end up in scenarios or cases like the running back in a cluster that clearly goes over the line based on where the ball was, is oftentimes the official is right there. There is no way that they can't and don't know where that ball was and if it crossed the plane. And there are multiple times where we have seen, even just this past season, 2024, 2025, where it was for sure that that running back crossed the plane. There is not a hope that they didn't. Or in other cases, we also got the reverse of that, where it's like there's no way that it did, and how you called that they did is unreal. But the refs are almost always sided with on the replay as a result of either the call or the no call, and that I think is an interesting one. And how I don't know how you would fix that.
Oh, I know exactly how you
without completely eliminating replay and just simply saying mistakes will be made one way or another.
Talking censoring the ball?
Well, okay, yeah. So Richard has got an excellent and correct point. I think this is an interesting, we don't have to go into today, but it was an interesting conversation I had with Pereira a while back about electronics and how that would shape the game going forward. He was anti don't put a chip in anything type of guy. I think he's softening to it, but anyway, that was an interesting conversation because I'm a tech guy. I spent 25 years in IT. I know exactly what it could do or not do. But Rich, actually, the answer to your question with regards to that and not impacting replay, particularly in like goal line situations or like you have like the 4th and inches thing or whatever, give the umpire the ability to make the call. Do you realize, guys, that in the mechanics, the umpire cannot make that call? It's solely on the line judge, down judge to make that call. And you got a guy coming over, like you said, Rich, you got a guy coming over the goal line. The umpire is right there. Have you guys ever seen an umpire put his hands up for a touchdown? When was the last time you saw that?
Stop it.
You can't, because that's not their mechanic. But yet we're all sitting here doing exactly what Rich just said. Why the hell isn't that a touchdown? And because that's not the umpire's call. And I've never understood that. In the ASFL, that'll be the umpire's call if he feels like he can make it. And here's the thing. That does exactly the other part of what Rich's comment was. They always tend to lean towards the official. Why? Because what are you going to do? The cop pulled me over and gave me a ticket. Well, you must have done something wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, well, it's your word against the cop. Cop wins. Pay the fine. Okay, pay the fine. Next time I just won't drive. I don't know. But they have to do that, because without that, you have complete chaos.
100%.
Add in line judges that don't know what the hell they're doing, and now we have this problem that Rich just brought up. It's like
it kind of reminds me like a play like the Rams versus the Saints when that PI call. I mean, it was so blatant, and I'm sure you guys probably remember that play. But I mean, I don't know. Are they not allowed to like look at that in the booth and just like overturn it?
Okay, well, here's a couple of good points there. First of all, I have to be on transparent. Gary Cavallero, the guy that made it, calls a good friend of mine. He lives in my neighborhood. Um, and I feel like they overlooked that because it was Gary, quite frankly. I don't have any other answer for you than that. I wish I did. But but to me, your bigger point, which is a brilliant one, because we live in this, oh, well, this play's not reviewable nonsense. If you're going to have, it goes back to my conversation with Texture. If you're going to have replay, why are some plays reviewable and some plays not? Are we going to play the game, or are we just going to go around and not play the game?
It's kind of like the NBA now.
We didn't really like that one. So I'm not saying that replay has to replay every play, that they have to stop for every play. But if replay sees something that should be stopped, every play should be reviewable to be stopped. And that's a perfect example, is that if that situation warranted back then that it wasn't reviewable, why not? Why do we have some plays that are reviewable and some not? I've never understood that.
Jack, you brought up something that reminded me of, you were talking about the Rams Saints. I was at a game in 2008 in San Diego against this guy's team, and with the infamous Ed Hockley rule happened, which I believe he didn't call it a fumble or something, or he did call it a fumble, one of the two, but it ended up working out in the Broncos' favor, where they won, and then I think it became a rule the following season, if I'm not mistaken. He was not loved in San Diego, I'll tell you that. But.
Well, that an inadvertent whistle is an official's worst nightmare, and when you have an inadvertent whistle, which means the whistle was what blew a play dead before the play was dead by rule, if you will.
Yes.
Because a referee's whistle does not kill a play. The rule book kills the play. The whistle's job is to enforce the fact that the play is over. So the rule book decides when a play is over, not the official. The official is just confirming by rule the play is over by blowing his whistle. So if he blows the whistle before the rule book says a play is over, that's an inadvertent whistle. You have all kinds of craziness that happens with regard to how do you officiate the result of a play if the play's not over, but the official said the play was over. And that's why we ran into problems and
Cincinnati versus the Raiders
for Ed for years. Yeah. He owned it. He came up and said, I blew it. I was wrong. He did the right thing.
I mean, it cost us a game.
That's the problem. And in the eyes of the officiating community, the Titanic had hit the iceberg. He never had the same level of respect. People respected him because he owned it and stepped up and said, I screwed up. But had it been any other official besides Ed Hockley, he probably would have been demoted. But because it was Ed Hockley, he maintained his white hat.
He reffed Super Bowls and things like that. His crews did. So he was pretty respected, is what you're getting at, Ref Guru.
Oh, yeah. And after that, the luster was kind of finally gone. Unfortunately, you saw Bill Carollo start to shine a little bit for a little bit. Bill Levy, and there were some others in there that were kind of in Hockley's shadow. Jerry Austin, a few others that were in Hockley's shadow. Hockley he kind of stepped aside.
His son's in the coaching.
Sean,
Sean, yeah. It's pretty crazy.
And the cool thing about it is Sean is one of those that did not adopt the bias hand-me-down culture that was given to some of the other officials. And I respect Sean a lot for that. I always have anyway. But I appreciate the fact that he has not adopted that bias culture. He's going to officiate the game the way it needs to be officiated. He doesn't care who wins or loses. He wants to do the right thing. And I applaud him for that.
What I think is pretty cool these days, especially if you're on like Twitter or X, however you want to call it, there's these analytical nerds, right, that just look at stuff and they will track certain ref crews and their percentages on how many times do they call holding, like on this team or that team, and it's pretty wild because I started seeing that a few years ago, and so like when you've got an upcoming game with somebody like somebody in the chat, the Chargers are playing the Chiefs in Brazil, right? I don't know who that crew is. I'm sure it's out there. Or I don't know if it's out there yet, but we started looking at as a fan, like, oh, this crew is reffing us. And we're almost like, as a fan base, fan list, I don't think the players care, but they're like, oh crap, like we gotta watch this.
Yep.
But I think it's kind of cool though.
There's no way the players don't care. I'm sorry, there's just no way.
So they know
because they know exactly. Yeah, they know exactly who they're being officiated by. Like I can tell you, when I was playing competitive rugby in that regard, there was again the officiating crews, and I knew who they were and all that kind of stuff, and they certainly knew who I was. I actually had a couple officials that were pulling me up and recommending me to go national at the time, so that was kind of cool. But I assume that kind of stuff happens in football as well. Just I live in Canada, and football isn't necessarily as big of a thing here. But with regards to the officiating crews and stuff like that, I guarantee you the players know, because they have been fed the stats, because the NFL is such a stats and information driven league in terms of the information that's available to them. And then there's also going to be just the natural preparation for the game. Like if that crew is known for calling holding penalties, then they are going to do everything within their power to, ensure that technique is on point.
I kind of disagree, Richie. I think it's more of the coaches are more aware of it than the players. Unless that player is like a crazy vet, like a Tom Brady or
Peyton Manning or someone like that.
Somebody like that who's been around everybody. I think it's more the coaches knowing like, oh shit, this is who we've got reffing this week, so we need to watch these guys doing this, so they pep talk their players and whatnot. But for the most part, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, because I think there's like it's yes and no's to the extent with the who's reffing what, unless it was like an Ed Hockley, right? Unless it was that, because guarantee you that if Ed ever after 2008 reffed another Chargers game, which I'm sure he did, they were like F you, Ed.
Well, Walt Coleman never did a Raiders game after the fumble.
See, there you go. I'm sure he wouldn't leave Oakland alive. Or
he didn't do a Raiders road game either. So,
Raider fans travel really well, dude. So there's that too.
Yeah. Well, and I would say I think there's an element to both of what you're saying that I think is correct. Remember that I would agree that the coaches are more in tune with the officials, particularly the referee, more than they are the individual crews. But your deep guys, your safeties, your corners, they know who their deep officials are. They know who they, maybe not on a first name basis. But again, remember, there's only 17 crews, right? There's 32 teams. So they're going to see these officials often. They've seen them off and on since training camp.
Right.
So there is a relationship. What I would say to the other point is that there is some relationship out there with regards to who these officials are. Not all players will know every official by name, of course, and since they moved the umpire out across from the referee, I'd say umpires are probably the one official the team knows the least about. Whereas back in the day, they were like buddies, because the middle linebacker would tap him on the butt and say, "Move over, because this is my gap." But I would say there's an element to both of those that's the same, but I would agree that not all teams will know all the pertinent statistics about all the officiating. But then again,
real quick, you just said something. You said something, ref, and the NFL is like a religion in this country. It's so massive now, so much money. Like it's dwarfing other sports. Like it's a miracle how some of these other sports are alive, and it's probably because the NFL has such a long off season.
Right.
So one thing when we watch games, right, that and if you've been into a live game too, you see it as well, is the refs coming up to the players, and it's the worst when it's on TV, because you're already rooting for your team and you see a ref be buddy with that other guy's quarterback or something, doing that whole thing. You're like, okay, why? Now I think that guy is like rooting for him, and we saw it with Tom Brady all the time. Like, oh my God, we were like, Jesus, just get this guy out of the league or whatever. But did you ever do that, ref? Like, were there guys that you knew that you would be like, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? Or during the game, were you more standoffish?
During the game, I would say my tendency was to be more standoffish for the exact optics that you pointed out. You don't want to be chumming it up with somebody, with one of the players, and the coach over there seeing you like, hey, what are you doing? And I would say, to your point, college, maybe more so than pro, because again, pro's entertainment, so they're okay with a little bit of, hey, bud,
Sure.
how you doing? College spends a lot of time with the don't fraternize with the players. You want to talk to somebody, talk to a coach. You want to talk to the captains, that's different. But don't be chumming it up out there. We don't want to see you smiling around, slapping the butt of a tight end who just dropped the pass. No.
Okay.
I mean, that's just not going to happen. In the NFL, you'll get away a little bit with that. I mean, I'm not sure that you could have you could have officiated a Brett Favre game and not had bubble gum stuck to your shoe or under your hat. I mean, who knows what kind of tricks he was playing. So the NFL understands that there's a little bit of that, but they are aware of those optics. Unfortunately, in my opinion, they're not as aware of those optics, although they'll talk about that we as fans are, because the NFL looks at those optics as a 32-team policy. We look at it as, hey, I'm a Raiders fan. Why are you talking to a Chiefs player? Well, to the NFL, the Chiefs Raiders is just two of the other 32 teams. So what's a little chatting it up? Well, you and me look at that going, well, wait a minute. So we see it through different filters. But I would say that they do understand that optic. But unless it's egregious, we as fans, we just have to put up with it. Remember, it's entertainment.
So
I don't like
it.
I didn't say
No,
I
I
agreed
don't
with
either.
it.
No,
No,
I
I don't
hate
either.
it. We've
I
talked
agree.
about this weeks ago, right, Richie? About this?
We did. So we have two supers, and then we got another follow-up. And ref, you've made a few comments earlier that I actually think you have successfully changed my mind on what the last question is in like 5 minutes.
Okay.
And I want to touch on that because
Sorry about that.
no, I'm actually really glad. I'm a huge give me more information, and if the information I get fed opens my eyes to a different perspective, I will happily change my mind on the spot, and that'll be my new normal, and I feel I can justify it. I'll get into that in a moment, but first, let's quickly bring up these two supers here. Again, Raider Shield family, thank you kindly. Let's go ahead and bring up the first one here. Just a $20 super, which is fantastic. I appreciate it. This is just touching back, actually, on our comments about Juwan Taylor. So Juwan Taylor is the most penalized player in the NFL in 2023, most in 24. Is it bad coaching, bias, or the player doesn't care enough about the game to fix himself? I actually think that an either-or proposition isn't necessarily the appropriate framing of that, in my opinion. I happen to have one of those heavily penalized left tackles on my team by the name of Garrett Bowles, who has an adequate and frankly accurate nickname of Garrett Holds.
I like that.
Look, I'm a Broncos fan. I'm allowed to say that stuff, and if you disagree, then
No, I
come
agree.
at me. Then come at me, and we'll talk about it. But I promise you, you'll have a hard time winning that argument. But in with regards to this here, I think you have to look at everything in totality. Sometimes you have players that are not capable or able of being coached. Sometimes you have bias towards the player, and sometimes the player doesn't care enough to fix himself. And then there's actually a fourth one that's missing there. Sometimes the player is actually desperately trying to correct their mistakes. And sometimes they either overcompensate and then make a mistake in another way, or sometimes they overcompensate and then find themselves in a position where they need to basically inflict a penalty on themselves because they've overcorrected, screwed up, and now they have to try to fix their own error. And frankly, all three or four of those can all be true in and of themselves. except for the contradictory of I don't care and I do care. Obviously, they can't coexist. But aside from that, Ref, what are your thoughts from the officiating perspective on that?
Yeah, that's a good one, and thanks for letting me chime in on that one, because I think there is. I would agree with your perspective, and so my answer isn't intended to contradict your approach. My answer is strictly from the officiating side of things because I've been down on the field, and this is what I see based on that. Coaches will do whatever they think they can to push the limit with regards to the rules. And I've heard this actually on the field from coaches where they will intentionally bend and darn near break the rule and yell out, make them call it. In other words, putting the onus on the official to have the laces to throw the flag. And so in a game time situation, if the officials are not trained well, or they're surprised by a particular situation, they may not call it because they may not be able to tell. There's a 40-second clock, right? So let's say by the time they spot the ball, there's 28 seconds left. They break the huddle. A coach has decided to bend the rule in some sort of formation or whatever. And the official has a few seconds to decide, what do I have here? Do I have a legal formation? Do I not? And then I've heard at high school, the coaches make them call it. And I actually had that yelled in my ear. And all of a sudden it startled me. And I'm like, wait a minute, what does he think I'm going to make a call about? And then I realized, they've dropped their tackle back and he's not covered. But it was a tackle on the far side. And that tackle's not my read. But the coach on my side is going to make him call it. Well, who's he talking to? Is he talking to me? Because that's not my call. I could call it, but then I'm going to get dinged in my report for what are you watching the far tackle for? You're supposed to be watching your tackle. I'm like, well, I'm watching the far tackle because my tackle's not doing anything. It's like, well, you shouldn't be watching the other tackle. That's the line judge. I'm like, well, the line judge isn't doing his job because he's not throwing the flag. So it's really frustrating. So you get into situations where sometimes you just don't know what's going on. Now,
or a line judge has Andy Reid breathing down his neck.
Well, there could be that, right? Exactly, because the farther up you go, the more hyper situation this happens. Now, the difference is in the NFL, they should be more experienced in order to handle that.
Sure.
They should have had discussions and training about that, and they should know what they're doing. In lower levels, you're not working necessarily with the same crew. And so a lot of dynamics and nuances are different. Maybe you got a 5-man crew. I mean, there's so many nuances here with regards to just this one piece. We could talk about every position on the field. There's nuances with all 22 of these spots. So let's just pick this one. But at the NFL level, you would have a higher level expectation that they are going to go ahead and call it. However, when it happens repeatedly like that, there's no way that there have not been upstream conversations through some channel, front channel, back channel, owner to owner, owner to commissioner, head coach to officiating department, somewhere in that chain where they've said, you're going to let this go, right? And the NFL's like, we don't really want to let it go. It looks bad, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but this guy's going to get beat and Mahomes is going to get his butt handed to him. We really need to, and the NFL's like, yeah, okay. I'm telling you, there's no way those conversations, maybe not exactly like that, but there's no way those types of conversations aren't going on, because if they weren't, that would be fixed. Somebody would call it. And
you're breaking my heart, ref.
Somebody would take the heat for calling it, but they don't call it. Why? Because the NFL said, let it go. Well, but then it's a slippery slope. How far are you going to let it go?
Part.
Exactly.
That's the entertainment part.
Rich,
yeah.
This is why we've got NFL players going over to WWE, because it's going to be just like picking, it's just going to be the same thing once they're done with NFL. They're, hey, this looks familiar.
This is the problem with being entertainment. It's a slippery slope. When you start to challenge the integrity of the game, because you're telling the officials to officiate it the way you want it officiated, because That makes you more money. That makes you look good. That pisses off Raiders fans because you're going to let the Chiefs get away with stuff, whatever it is. And I'm not saying it's happened, but I wouldn't be surprised if I wouldn't be surprised if the NFL says, yeah, let it go, because they'll be talking about that for a whole week.
Every network,
we'll be in the news cycle till they play the Chargers. Somebody said one time, bad publicity is still publicity. And I don't think the NFL, quite frankly, you guys, really gives a flying flip about what that publicity is, because they've got all the money and time to do whatever they want. They can spin whatever narrative in any direction they want to. And that's the world we live in. So you put the officials who have been charged by their charter to protect the integrity of the game. And that's one of the reasons why I walked away.
In talking about this, you brought up Patrick Mahomes too, is, what about, and this is something we've talked on this show. I've talked to, we talked with Captain Jack about this, like when you brought up Mahomes, him running, to look like he's going to go out of bounds. And then at the last second, he doesn't go out of bounds. And then he takes a hit and there's a flag thrown on it.
That's a problem that needs to be fixed.
Yes.
That's a problem that needs to be fixed. They either got to treat that like a quarterback slide, but if he wants to do a juke and come back but that's legal within the rule book. Can you still clock him? Probably not, but he's still in the field of play. If he fakes if he fakes like he's a runner now, he's not a quarterback because he's outside the pocket. So you tell me, if that's a running back, fakes like he's going to go out of bounds, but doesn't, stays in the field of play and somebody clocks him, is that a flag?
No.
I don't know. Maybe not. 70% of the time, no. Then why is it for a quarterback? Because he's worth $4 billion in the Chiefs franchise.
The answer is never.
That double standard drives me nuts.
The answer is never.
Well,
no, the answer. No. The answer to your question is, when does that ever happen to running back? The short answer, it doesn't even to be elaborated on. The answer is never.
So so here's the thing: either define the quarterback differently,
correct,
and he plays by a whole new set of rules now.
Correct.
Right? You got to carry a pillow in your back pocket or whatever if you're on defense.
Lay him down.
You get you a couple Serta mattresses and lay him out there, or change the definition of a runner. But I don't know how you do that. So, but again, you have to understand that he's out of the pocket. He's crossed the line of scrimmage. He's a runner. If he gets clocked, if I were doing the game, it would not be a flag. Would I be out of the league if I didn't throw the flag? Yeah. But this is the problem I have with it. I love the perfect question, by the way.
So much money.
So we may as well just jump real quick into it, and then we'll touch on that last element there, which I have a preemptive question for the chat before I ask the question to you as well.
Sure.
Vontez Perfect. I mean, this dude was infamous when he was playing in the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care what team you follow or played for or anything. You know who that dude is. He had records in terms of fines and other things.
Yeah.
So do you think he was hunted over time for ejections, not elections? And Raider Shield family, thank you for not using another word that is in a similar vein. This is a family-friendly show to end his career, or was he just his own worst enemy? And so I think this is an interesting one.
Well, I think it's a combination. I think if he had played in the 70s, he would have been a Hall of Famer. He played in the wrong era. Here's everything we could. I would love to talk about this forever, but really, here's the gist of 30,000 feet. The NFL is trying to make the game safer. They're trying to take what they think is that quote nonsense out of the league, and he was his own worst enemy. Was he targeted? Yeah, because they're looking for everything that he does because they want that quote out of the game. Should it be out of the game? Well, that's another discussion. But I think if he had backed off a little bit, things would have been okay. But he didn't want to necessarily change his style, and I'm not suggesting that he should have. But the NFL was going to be like, we're going to make an example out of him, and we're going to make sure we take X out of the game, whatever they felt like that was. And so, yeah, I totally agree that every time he stepped on the field, the back judge, that was their key. You could have let all of the other 21 guys rob a bank and get away to Mexico with a taco truck, and Burfict would have been left in the locker room to shower all by himself because the back judge still be there watching him.
Yeah.
So it was a combination of things. And I think it's an unfortunate situation. I think it could have been fixed, but I think the player bears some responsibility, right? Because we wouldn't be having this conversation.
It's their job. This is their job, right?
Right. So the question then is, I guess, how well do you want to do your job? And I think was he outside the box? Probably. But if he wasn't going to change, then I don't know that the NFL had a lot of other choice, because the peer pressure from his own teammates or other teammates or other coaches or owners who were like, we got to get this out of the game. Same with like they did the horse collar tackle type of thing. We got to get this out of the game. So was he targeted? Yeah. But did he have to be? No. Who bears responsibility for that? Well, not the officials up front. I think the officials just helped end it. I don't think they started it.
Yeah. So this theme here, you touched on it earlier, Raph. Remember I said I've already changed my mind, and it's going to take quite a bit, actually, I think, to move me back over. I come from the business world. I also work in tech. And so I'm pretty data-driven when it comes to this kind of stuff. And you made a couple points there that I think are going to have it very difficult for me to change my mind now back to where I was. Full-time refereeing in the NFL. That's the overarching theme. So the question I have for the chat, and ultimately I like the other two co-hosts here to give us their answers as well, and then we'll ask a question of you. Those in the chat, leave the comment. Touching base after. I want to see your comments below. The big question, the 800-pound gorilla question that everyone loves asking at the end and during and before and leading in and at the dinner table and all the other places. Should the NFL have full-time officials? Yes or no? Love to hear the chat's answer to that question, whether or not they wish and they think the NFL should have full-time officials.
Ref Guru changed my mind as well.
And okay, cool. So I bet you he changed our minds for the same reason.
Yep.
Right.
Which way did I change it so I know how to answer the question?
Okay. I was 100% coming into this show full-time NFL officials,
Same.
like steadfast all the way. You made one comment in your kind of discussion there about stuff, and I was like light switch, and I full like
same, Rich. Exact same thing with me, Richie. Exact same thing. My whole life growing up watching NFL, I'm like, once I found out, that refs, like, this is their second job or a hobby or whatever, I was like, well, the NFL makes enough money. This should be their full-time job.
Yeah.
And up until I'm today's years old, and I disagreed with that. I am today's years old where I go, no, they shouldn't. I'm glad a lot of these refs have professional jobs. Speaking of Ed Hockley, I believe he was a trial lawyer or something.
He was, yeah.
Yeah, so, so it's like, a lot of these refs, I'm not saying all of them, they have some sort of, high-end job, right? Where they make
career.
Career.
School teachers or principals or whatever, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, and then when you talked about, if the NFL getting their claws more in as a, full-time, you only work for us, that scared the bejesus out of me, as this entertainment league is doing so anyways every year.
Correct.
It's like a little piece of my heart breaks off every year.
Yeah. Jack, curious on your thoughts, and then I want to throw it over to Ref Guru, and that was exactly the piece in what Ref Guru has told us here. I was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't ever, that's a vantage point, because it basically gets into confirmation bias, it gets into game rigging, it gets into a whole, just host of other things, and I was like, I had never come at it from that angle before. And as you were talking, my whole mind was just breaking and shattering.
Smoke
and reforming a new opinion on the spot. And I thought it was great. So thank you for that. But Jack, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm still kind of torn. I see what we were talking about earlier. How they get judged and everything. Honestly, the NFL it should be like a third party thing. So there is zero bias. You're not working for the NFL. You're working for a third party that serves the NFL. That way, keep any of the unbiased stuff out, and you're not getting regulated by the NFL. So I don't know, man. It's like I'm still kind of torn. I was the same way in the beginning, and I hear all the valid points, but I just don't like the way it's done. I just think the NFL shouldn't be able to crack back on the refs, and that's again where the bias kind of comes in. So if it's a third party that they hire and they have no control of that, then I think you're going to get a better ref game. So I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on it.
I need to go get some tinfoil.
Yeah. There's a lot of parts to this. The first part of this is that from my perspective, which is the only one I have, but they've never defined what full-time official means. Is it like you said, where that's the only job that they'll have? Or does that just mean that in terms of amount of time spent, they have to have more, out of a 2,080 hour week, they got to work 1,100 hours because that's more than half. So that's quote full-time. So they've never, in my opinion, they've never really defined what full-time is. And I think the general consensus has been full-time means you don't work for anybody else. And that scares me the same way it scares you, is that then they have total control. If it's completely separate, well, that'd be to me kind of like the police department going, well, we're going to do an investigation on ourselves to see what went wrong. I'm like,
Right.
Really? Good luck with, finding the results of that. Well, we found out that there wasn't really anything going on there. So case closed. Well, what the NFL has to have some jurisdiction other than we're just giving you the paycheck. But for me, the full-time versus part-time conversation and the points we just talked about are terrific parts of it. But a lot of it stemmed from the fact that they didn't like the calls that the officials were making, and they felt that more time dedicated to the NFL, if you will, in terms of full-time, would create better officials. Because, well, part-time officials don't spend enough time, and so full-time officials will spend more time, so they'll be better. Well, for the last 20 years, I've been pounding the pavement going, nothing will change until they change the training. The training is stuck in 1974. I don't care if you have part-time officials, half-time officials, full-time officials, no officials. They're all going to until you get the training updated. Once we have the proper training, we can go back and see what the results are of that training that's now in 2026 and not buried in 1974. Then let's have a discussion about whether or not they should be full-time or part-time. They're making a argument about full-time or part-time based on 1974 results of training. And my suggestion is don't change that till we change the training. Let's see if the training and improved training will get us what we think we want in terms of results, because nobody really knows what those results are. What do you, if the NFL says that their accuracy rating is 98%, it's the best in the world. Okay, great. Pat yourself on the back for a 98% rating that you gave yourself. Does somebody think that full-time officials will make it 99? Because they'll all say, oh, you can never be 100% because it's there are people involved. Okay, maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. I think technology and officials could officiate a perfect game. Everyone thinks I'm nuts for saying that. But I believe that you could get it to 99.5. So if not, is 99.5 acceptable? And if it is, was that with full-time officials or part-time officials? We don't know. So I hear you, and I'm with you on all those conversations about full or part-time officials. But until we train the officials with modern technology, I don't think the part-time versus part-time is the discussion that should be taking place. I think they should be having a training discussion, check the results, and then revisit the full-time or part-time. Am I 100% against full-time officials? I used to be in the same boat you are. I was 100% no. And I'm still 85, 90% no for the same reasons you are. But the 10% of me says, you know what, if you're going to be entertainment and just blow stuff up anyway, what does it matter? I mean, if you're going to tell the officials that this is how they're going to officiate, well, it doesn't matter whether they're part-time or full-time. If they're going to do what you tell them to do anyway, does it matter? And
Ref, my issue with that line of thinking is I am today years old in my mental mindset of no full-time officiating. I have not had enough time with this stance to start becoming cynical about it yet.
Yeah.
Like I'm within a 2-hour window or less than a 2-hour
Refs had
window.
decades with this.
Like having changed my mind just recently, I haven't had enough time with it yet to start getting cynical about it.
No, I get it. But I think the bigger discussion here is what I'm really trying to focus on isn't so much the full-time or part-time discussion as the training.
I agree.
They're totally skipping over the training. You know, they're still watching video. You know, it's like you cannot teach officials how to officiate from video. Here's the thing.
Right.
You got 17 umpires who, in my opinion, are out of position. Now, I know why they moved them for safety reasons, blah, blah, blah. But the umpire is not an umpire if he's not behind the defensive line. I'm sorry. I don't want him run over or use his picks any more than the next person, but I just feel like they're completely ineffective across the referee. But for the sake of argument, let's say you have 17 umpires in a room and you're watching a video from a television shot way up here, pointed down towards the field, and they're saying, okay, how many in here have holding on that call? And you get anywhere from 0 to 6. You're not going to get all 17. Okay. Put a hat on those officials with the set of virtual reality glasses, put them all down on, they're sitting in a classroom, but through virtual reality, you put them all down on the field in their natural position, watching the play. They're all watching the play from the exact same position at the exact same time with the exact same look. And you tell me how many officials, if you say, do you have holding? You're going to go from 0 to 6 to about 15 or 16. Now, how much better are your calls now? Because we trained the officials better with better technology and better training. If you put all 7 officials in a crew with a virtual reality infrastructure where I can control what they see, how they see it, how I want them to see it, your officiating is going to get better. Because I have 17 back judges all seeing the exact same play at the same time, the way I want them to see it. And that I can guarantee you there will be 5 or 6 of them that go, oh, I never saw it that way before. Well, duh. Yeah. And I've seen that time and time and time. When I teach these, and I go to high schools and I look at the officials and I stand behind the line judge at practice, I say, what are you looking at? Or I'm looking at the tackles. Do I have 5 guys on a line of scrimmage and what's my key? I said, where's the ball? I think it's at the 35. Oh, great. So they're going to snap the ball, run a play. There's going to be a flag that goes from the previous spot. Where was the ball? I don't know, but I had 5 guys on the line of scrimmage. Give me those line judges with the virtual reality, and I will walk them through their pre-snap routine. I will walk them through everything that they need to know, and I've got 35 line judges all seeing the same thing. Next time they go back out there, they're going to know that ball's at the 35-yard line. How many line judges went out there and had no idea where the ball was? Oh, I got 5 guys on the line of scrimmage. Great. Who cares? Where's the ball? What down is it? What's the clock say? How many timeouts do they have? We got to fix the training. When we fix the training, we can go back to the full-time, part-time discussion. That's my take. It doesn't have to be a popular one, but that's my take.
It's a good take.
I think that's fair. Like I said, the one thing that really changed my mind on that is
control.
The concept of control over the individual as it pertains to the NFL, clearly showing us all that it is a basically entertainment masquerading as a sport in some regard. And the more they move in that direction, the more you don't want the officials to be fully entrenched in the league itself. You want them to be that you want them to be that independent entity in some regard, whether it be
No.
100 independent contractors or full-time
Yeah.
employees within an independent entity, as Jack suggested, something to that effect. But
I
I
would-
agree with the
I would-
training. I agree with the training.
Yeah. Well, and I love your capture there with how you lined that, because I think that's absolutely true for today, and I agree with you. Here's my concern, and I've heard this through the rumor mill, that the NFL wants full-time officials for the exact reason that basically we don't. But that they're going to leverage the technology factor as a way to get it. Because they're basically going to say, look, if we've got enough tech, we don't need officials. So if you guys want officials, you're going to have to do it our way or the highway, because we're just going to get the tech to replace you. And I'm concerned that the officials will be like, oh, geez, if I'm going to keep doing my job, I guess I got to go, jump on the bandwagon. And that's my concern, is that the NFL will start to implement this tech slowly. And all of a sudden they'll realize, wow, geez, maybe we don't need these officials. Well, that's not going to go over well with the fans in an interesting dichotomy switch or paradigm shift, because they'll be like, well, no, we need officials out there. How are we going to get a fair game? Well, because we've got chips in the ball, we got radar, we got lasers, and we've got drones, we've got sky cams, we got all this other nonsense. What do we need officials for? I don't know. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes forward. But that would be my concern, is that I think the NFL wants full-time in order to maintain control. They tried to do that with Walt Anderson, and it didn't work. And they had a big fallout over that. So they've had a changing of the guard, so to speak, and we'll see how long they can keep that. But keep in mind now that the older officials that went through we're independent, we're going to stay independent, they're dying off, if you will, so to speak.
Yeah, they're fading away.
And the new guys coming in, they've been marshaled through this Mackey development program, which is much more structured, which is much more do as we say. And I don't know where the evolution goes, but it's
like militaristic almost.
Kind of, it's making me nervous about where they're going. And I think it's like, we're gonna take this away and take that away. You take away in little pieces, nobody notices. Well, but I notice, and I'm concerned about where they might go with that.
I want to be mindful of time. There's a couple other topics that we want to bring forward, but I do want to bring up one thing before we get into those other topics. This is the Wild Wild West show. This is the AFC West. All four of us are fans of a team within the division. We forgive those that are not necessarily of our own team, and that's fine and fair. But as we look at the division and the calls, we would be amiss to not bring forward not just the fact that the Chiefs right tackle feels that 3 seconds prior to snap that he is allowed to move because he feels like it, but also there was at minimum 3 to 5 calls last year that were at minimum what most fanalists and fans and frankly, even the league in many regards agrees with, due to some actions that were taken a couple weeks ago, egregious, or at least poorly called enough or not sound enough, I think might be the better way of framing it, where 3 NFL officials were demoted. Ref, you and I had already gone back and forth a little bit on that on X. I do try to be as fair as I can when it comes to officiating, because I am not naive to the fact that it is a difficult gig, and I totally appreciate that. But nonetheless, when you're wanting quality, you need to maintain that bar, kind of like what we spoke about before. And you're now in the professional ranks, and the wiggle room and the time for the safety net has kind of passed those officials, and that's why you kind of have the feeder systems in those kind of upper 2 tiers, the NFL being the height, and then the college level D1, etc., kind of being the feeder, if you will, for the NFL. What were your thoughts on the kind of the 3 big time calls that were at minimum controversial for the Chiefs, and what happens behind the scenes as an official when those types of calls are made or not made, depending on the angle and the thing?
I think what happens behind the scenes is changes a little bit based on the administration, if you will, and who's running the show. But generally speaking, there's going to be a notification sent to the crew chief, the white hat, about how his crew did overall in the game. And if there are calls, they will be taken out of the game video and sent to them. The officials get a game replay that they can take home with them on the flight home. They still have access to Rev 360, but I mean their game performance stuff is in terms of what they did is immediate. Their grading comes later, Monday or Tuesday. The white hat will get information based on what his crew did, and if there's controversial calls, the white hat will have had a discussion with the officiating director with regards to that call, what it meant, especially if it was on a national broadcast. If it was a regional coverage, less scrutiny, maybe we can learn from it. Maybe we can let it go. Maybe they just don't like the official. It's hard to say because not all referees get along with all the crew members. So there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of politics and dynamics in there. But generally, they'll have the white hat will have a discussion about his crew in general. But if there's a specific play, such as maybe some of the ones you're referring to, they'll discuss that at length. He'll have a discussion with that official about what he saw and why he made the call, didn't make the call, what was going on with regards to the call. That all factors into the grading that the official will get ultimately, because he'll get graded on the call initially. He'll have a discussion with the white hat. The white hat will say, we're going to keep the grade, or the official can contest the grade. If he's going to contest the grade, they're going to have to spend more time with figuring out, it's not really arbitration, but they'll get a chance to challenge a grade if they think it's egregious enough. Generally, they don't, because you don't get many challenges, if you will. So you better pick them and use them and win them. But beyond that, not much more is said after Wednesday, because by Thursday the crew has moved on to their next game. And so the NFL then is just kind of in sit and watch mode. Is the official improve? But the other nuances that you're referring to here are, what game was that? What team was that? Is that call that official made consistent with their other screwed up calls, if you will? Or is this one like a one-off? And was it a one-off against who? Raiders, Chiefs, Chargers, Bills, Patriots, Saints? We don't know. So they're gonna catalog all that. In the case of in tying that into the officials that were let go at the end of the season, there's several nuances there. One official never should have been at that level. I saw this official early on, and I said this on NFL Nation Live many times. I'm scratching my head going, I have no idea how this person never got a hat. I would have never advocated for that person to be officiating.
Fake it till you make it kind of thing, huh?
Just not competent enough. The other one was about competency in terms of number of calls. The first one I mentioned was just competency, period. Mechanics, communication, not in the right position, bad calls, the whole 9 yards, the whole gamut of why you don't make it. The second one was more about bias consistency, if you will. We're sure seeing a lot of these calls in Chiefs games. What's going on? Oh, I don't know. You don't like the Chiefs? No, I like all the teams fine. No, you don't. I mean, that was pretty obvious to some of the ones that, like you're referring to. It's like, that's way too consistent. We're not going to put up with that. And so for lower level officials, in other words, lower level being the first 5 years, you're under a lot of scrutiny. If you make it past the first 5 years, or unless you're Sarah Thomas, and nothing wrong with Sarah, she's a great official, but she could have thrown a flag at the water cooler water person and still would have made it.
Is that the blonde?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I worked with Sarah in camp. I like her. She's good. She was not the first female official, by the way. and they had to change it. Well, she was the first full-time official. Okay.
Mm.
Shannon Easton was the first woman to ever officiate an NFL game. She was a replacement ref with myself. But they ran a roughshod over that, saying, nah, it doesn't count. Yeah, it counts. Those games were regular season games, and we got paid. They absolutely counted. If you want to go back and take those games away from the teams that won those games that she worked on, okay, then you can say that. But so they had to change Sarah Thomas's title of first female official to first full-time female official. Okay. The third official that was let go was a personality conflict or personnel issue, if you will. Those happen from time to time. Disciplinary issues can range from all kinds of things. Ate the White Hats lunch by mistake, got on the wrong plane, got in a car. Who knows? Got DUI. There could be a million reasons why there could be personnel or disciplinary reasons. I'm not saying that any of those were part of this. I'm just saying there's a number of reasons. So, yeah, those officials didn't make it, and I don't know where they're going to go. You can technically go back into the Mackey development program until you're ready to come back, but they're not coming back. So they may go back to Division I if the conference feels like they're competent. But, really once you get out of NFL, you're damaged goods, because everybody is thinking, well, you're going to come in and you're going to think you're all better than the rest of us, so we don't want you here, which is unfortunate, because if they really wanted to work with that person, they could teach them a lot, because the people that you're going back to haven't been at that level, and you have. So if you wanted to train them, they could do a lot. But unfortunately, the politics and dynamics makes you damaged goods in most cases. I got kicked out of my local association because I was, quote, damaged goods. I'm like, okay, whatever you guys want. All I wanted to do is come in and help train your officials, but that wasn't good enough for them. So, there's a lot of reasons why officials don't make it. And but those are the three main ones: competency, bias, and personnel.
Yeah, Raiders Shield family sent a super chat out, said, damn, ref, that was deep, running out of money. And then Pool Cab, this is right. I'm going to read this, man. Fair and Raiders are like oil and water, laughing out loud. So that brings me, so Guru, this brings us something as Raider fans that we all want to hear this. What do you, starting off, there's 3 plays in Raiders history. One of them was against the Chargers. But starting off, what was your thought on the tuck rule with that game against, New England?
I have the real answer, and then I have my politically correct answer. Which one do you want?
Both. How about that?
After 9/11, the Patriots were going to win the Super Bowl.
After Katrina, who is going to win the Super Bowl?
Saints.
So
tuck rule was a way to get the Patriots forward. They can argue all they want to that it was a rule. It doesn't matter. It was a fumble, and that nullifies any other tuck rule. I said T with a tuck rule. That eliminates any rule that you could have hid behind because he fumbled. So that's my answer. He fumbled. It was called a fumble on the field. There wasn't sufficient video evidence to overturn it, but they did because they needed the Patriots to move on. And that was their lightning rod to
ruin our lives for a decade or whatever it was, Bill and Tom.
It changed everything. And I don't think that that's a bad thing, but I'm a Raiders fan too, so it hurts. And so is the Immaculate Reception. I mean, on and on and on. Rob Lytle's fumble. I mean, come on. But it is what it is, and we can all joke about it now, but it was hard to take then because everybody knew that was the wrong call. And the year after, they essentially admitted it was the wrong call without administering it was the wrong call. They're saying, well, we're going to take that rule out. Oh, gee, okay, great. Now you take it out. Everybody knows it was wrong call, and but it is what it is.
Yeah, it's like with the Immaculate Reception, even Franco never said he caught the ball. He would never said, yep, I caught this ball. And I thought what was interesting back in those days, wasn't it the rules like you can't touch 2 offensive players, and it did?
Well,
so
we don't the the marketing story is we don't know what happened because we don't have a clear view of whether or not the ball touched the ground. I don't think it did, but again, you can't see from the frame shot from NFL films, which apparently is the only frame we have. NFL and the Patriots lose film like NASA. Oh, geez, we lost that. Really? Okay. But yeah, back in the day, you could not have two offensive players touch the ball, and the same thing in Super Bowl V, right? Did Renfro touch the ball before Mackey got it and ran for a touchdown? I think he did. In the same way that they analyzed Renfro's tipping of the ball, if you will, that went into the hands of John Mackey, who ran for a touchdown Super Bowl V. Of course, Dallas argued that Renfro didn't hit the ball. But if you look at the trajectory of the ball, it changes. And I think when Tatum hits Fuqua, hard for me to imagine that there wasn't some contact with the ball based on the ricochet of it with the way he hit him. I mean, would history have been different? Yeah, probably a little bit. But it's folklore, and Franco would have never admitted Fuqua because they don't want the controversy of that to end. It's too much of a conversation piece. It's too much for everybody. If somebody ended the conversation, well, we'd move on to another topic. But we're still talking about it because nobody will end the conversation, and we never will know probably. It was tough to swallow then. We still don't like it now, but it is what it is. And I don't really like to admit that I'm at peace with it, but I'm old enough now that it's like, yeah. But yeah. But I think Tatum hit Fuqua, and I think Tatum hit the ball. We don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then the last one I got, this is against DZ's team, the infamous holy roller play.
Yeah. Well,
so what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've got two. The first one is let me go back. The Brady fumble was payback for Stabler's touchdown against the Patriots in '76. Okay. Patriot got called for belt and Stabler on the head, if you will. And I've gone back and looked at that going, really? Okay, yeah, he hit him in the head, but people get hit in the head all the time. And would it be a penalty today? Yeah. Was it a penalty in '76? I don't know. But it gave us a chance to win the game. I think that was just payback for '76. Anyway, holy roller. That should have been ruled a touchdown. It was a fumble. Did Banaszak push it forward knowingly? Oh, maybe. But did he? If Banaszak had the field presence to know that him pushing it forward was going to give it any chance at all, or even had any inkling that Casper was anywhere near that where he could pick it up and score for a touchdown, I'm going to let that one go. I mean, as much as I'd like to say Chargers should have won the game, I'm like, nah, if we're going to fumble the ball and Banaszak's going to scoop it up and roll it and push it forward, hoping that something's going to happen, just get your popcorn ready for that stuff. I mean,
right.
I got to let that one go. I understand how Charger feels about it. I know that the bird died in the upper deck that day, or whatever the mascot is for them. But I'm going to let that one go. I'm okay.
The San Diego Chicken, are you talking about?
San Diego Chicken, yeah. He took a big old flop on that one, and I'm just going to let that one go. I'm okay with it.
I love how these games and rules have these iconic names, and then we're still talking about them.
Responsible for a lot of them.
Yeah. I see, there's guys, and look, I know you guys are two Raiders fans, and there's a lot of Raiders fans that join this chat, you know what I mean, through Captain Jack's channel, and they're like, we're the most penalized team, and I hear it every year, and I'd like to know if somebody would look it up, who is the most penalized team, and I think they've come out like the Raiders have been, but then I go back, and I'm like, were they the most penalized under Gruden? Were they, they're definitely probably not going to be super penalized under Carroll.
No.
But you got to look at who they've had as coaches there for the last how many decades. It's been no offense, it's been a dumpster fire. I like your guys' current DC. I like them, with AP. I think he's a good DC, but there's been some piss poor coaches there and bad GMs. believe me, I've dealt with it. I've had some really bad coaches ever since they've been in LA, and a GM that our fan base detested. So I always kind of think, do Raider fans ever think like, hey, our players weren't put in the best scenarios? Like, look, I know about Max. Look, I'm a Max fan. I think a lot of fans of other teams like Max Crosby because of his off the field stuff, and he's kind of like this blue collar pass rusher, the Condor. And I've seen it against my team. He's not, he's getting held. Somebody's holding him, stuff like that. But like the other stuff, like Raider fans, will you guys admit that maybe your guys' players were not just in the best of situations?
Well, yeah, I think Raider fans probably have a filter on that for sure. I do know that for Raider fans, having been an official, and because I look at the game a little bit differently, you do notice the nuances for the Raiders seem to be a little bit different, or the standard seems to be a little bit different for the Raiders. The bar is a little bit lower, so you see other teams do something like there's no flag, and we do something that seems half as bad as that, and we get a flag. For years, the NFL used the Raiders as basically their scapegoat.
And I wonder why.
Because they didn't like them.
Now, but Al Davis is gone. It's Mark the Muppet.
And it should have changed. But again, you've still got old guards in there because the part of the reason how they used them was if you're not sure, throw a flag on the Raiders. If we don't like the call, we'll use it as a training tape, but you won't get downgraded.
I mean, I can see that. Look, I can see that.
So if you throw that against the Chargers and we don't like it, you're going to get downgraded. So use the Raiders as your guinea pig. You don't like a flag, throw it. We'll penalize them now. Don't worry about that. We'll use it as a training tape.
Dark, I don't like that mentality. You're saying you're still a target. You don't know that. You don't know what's coming up this season. You guys have brought in Spy Check. You got Tom Brady in the building. You hired Pete Carroll. Like, it's on the up and up in Las Vegas.
Right. And I think that's why it's changing. I think there's a lot of dynamics there that are changing. The Raiders culture is
great
changing.
Fan base. Raiders have one of the best fan bases.
Al's gone. They're out of Oakland. There's a lot there. A lot of the old guard officials have attritioned out. The NFL's kind of changed their philosophy in general about the Raiders. They've kind of adopted them, if you will, as, okay, yeah, maybe we should treat them, quote, a little bit more fairly. But I don't think when I say in the past, I really don't have a date for that. But in the past, that's been an issue. I think over the last 3 or 4 years, it's changed a little bit.
Don't bring up yellow.
A lot. But I think it has changed a little bit. But here's the thing. The part of the reason why it's changed is because of the filter that it looks like other teams like Chiefs or whatever are getting away with things. So the discussion around the Raiders gets less and less because we're talking about somebody else now.
Look, talk about a team. In the last 5 years, I looked at this and I think I talked about this on the show. The Chargers have lost against the Chiefs by like 2 points, by 6 points, by a touchdown. Only one time in 5 years have they like really handled us. And so, and you can always go back to those games, and break them down, and you'll see missed call here, missed call there. Everybody does, and you're like, mother effer.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like the Chiefs have third and 13, and there's a 15-yard penalty for something. And you're like, really? Yeah. So
you brought up an interesting point, though.
It's hard to explain what that, and I think until the NFL comes out to address and explain those issues, I think they have a transparency issue. I'll stop short of calling it an integrity issue, but I think they have a transparency issue, which clouds a lot of this, and I think it should be different, but unfortunately it's not.
So, let's look at. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a team in today's NFL that has, we'll call it challenges or something like that, but there really isn't a team that has adopted the bad boy image in the NFL today. There just isn't, right? Now, if we're going to be honest, removing any silver and black filter, the Raiders in 20 years ago or slightly even further back than that we're wearing that as a badge of honor. I think that is a fair comment and statement to make. I have met almost no Raiders fan that has been a Raiders fan, for that period of time, who has pushed back on that so far, right? I think that's fair. Like
Fair.
I know I'm the Broncos fan in the room, but I just want to make sure like I'm trying to be as fair and charitable as possible. So now think about it from an officiating perspective. If the team that you are now stepping onto the field to officiate against for the entirety of your upbringing and childhood and into your teens and 20s and in that kind of those formative years where you're kind of really becoming like, into the sport, is literally known and you've seen visually on the screen where it's like the dude just ran behind a guy and clocked him. Like, and he was wearing the silver and black. That's going to absolutely taint an opinion, whether or not you'd like to admit it or not as a Raiders fan, right? I think it kind of ties a little bit into our conversation, except on a more macro level, to what we were talking about Vontaze Burfict, right? Vontaze Burfict was the target to kind of prove a point to the league, and he said, "I'm not changing," and the league said, "Hold my beer."
And he figured out how to do that in Cincinnati before he went to the Raiders.
It happened to a player in my team last year, Derwin James. He's a safety that I feel like is from a different era, kind of similar. And he got clipped. I think he actually got suspended for a game because it was like his second infraction or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm glad Jim Harbaugh stepped up for him and says, I hope he doesn't change a thing and continues to play this way. And who takes care of those fines? I don't know. I'm sure they come out of Derwin's pay, but it gets to like, I don't know. It's just you neuter these players, right? Essentially, you're neutering them. Like we watched as a fan. Like I don't know if it did with Vontaze. I think Vontaze, like I remember some of that stuff with him. It's like still foggy. But I know that like they're telling this guy, don't play football. Essentially, they're like, don't do what you've been taught.
Yeah.
So you watch them hesitate. Therefore, injuries increase, which they say, then they get hurt.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, 98% of the officials that are out there never played the game. So they don't understand what the coaches understand with regards to the complexities of playing the game and trying not to hit somebody when you're going full speed, right? Or if a quarterback slides, you accidentally hit him in the head, even though you're trying to dive over him, you get a flag. Well, because the commissioner wants a flag for concussions, I'm like, we've lost the common sense of the game. We've taken that away from the officials in terms of the fact that this is a contact sport. So this is where we get into back to this discussion is that the NFL said, no, you're going to officiate it this way. Well, all right. So you get the quarterback to slide because you want to save the quarterback. And there was more discussion about where you're going to spot the ball than how's the defensive player going to avoid the quarterback. And an official knows if there's malicious intent or not to cream that quarterback, or if he's trying to not hurt him and get out of the way. So he's trying to not hurt him, but he still hits him in the head. That's not a penalty. I'm sorry, it's not.
The last couple seasons been weird.
And it is. And so you have all of these nuances. The official has to make an instant decision. Oh, hit him in the head. That's a flag. Well, no, it's not. But to some officials it is, because the NFL said any hit to the head. Well, by what? Somebody's arm, a toenail, bird poop. What did he get hit in the head with?
But you're actually missing the other side. No, you're missing the other side of this. And ref, we hinted at it with the Mahomes calls, of where Mahomes has learned, although he's getting better at not doing it, because the officials, I believe, have probably been given a direction to allow him to get hit now at the sideline when he pulls the crap that he does. But
they did that in the playoffs.
Yeah. But as an example. In that example, as we were talking about, is the ref a runner or not? Well, he is. He should be able to get clocked at the sideline one way or another if he's not going out of bounds. So, sayonara, you'll only do that a few times with a defensive end is going to crush you. But anyway, the point that I'm making here though is what you're referring to is the incentivization or the bastardization of gaming the rules and actually skewing things. So while the coaches obviously don't want to get sued by players for encouraging to do things that they get hurt because then there's liability elements, players will start doing it because there's incentives in their contracts if they make it to the playoffs or not. Or there is like, the extra pieces on whether or not that they score or are able to throw, say, a certain number of touchdowns in their contract as a quarterback.
Or their team captain have to set
or
an example.
Yeah, exactly. And so they'll start gaming the system to say, hey, do you know what?
Mm-hmm.
I know that no matter what, as long as my helmet gets hit by that defensive player when I slide, I'm going to get a 15-yard penalty because the refs have been literally mandated by the league saying no matter what, do the thing. Well, what do you think a quarterback's going to do? Do you think he's going to
lift his head?
Yeah, he's going to lift his head into the hit and be like, yes. And that's how you end up in scenarios where you hear about it in the news. I hate to use as an example, but it's basically you're putting a negative incentive structure in play for the gaming of the rules. What I would love to see, and I'd actually like your opinion on it, because I like to see some of these things occur in the legal system as well. I'm in tech, but I have a huge legal background. I would love to see negative incentives for repeat offenders that do the sorts of things that we've seen Mahomes do, like on the sidelines, where they know that he knows he's a quarterback and he knows he's going to get the calls. So then he kind of fakes going out of bounds, but doesn't actually go out of bounds, but then comes back in. I'd love to see that then just not get called on a go forward basis. And I'd also love to see players that intentionally lead in or fake a slide and then get hit or something like that. I'd actually like to see the offensive player get a flag.
All you need is for the league to say to the officials, we want that out of the game, and a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct would end that tomorrow.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, so with that, and I've always said this from the very beginning, curious as to your thoughts. If the league is truly, and I mean truly, wanting to make the game safer, if that is the North Star for the NFL, as they're claiming, which I think is crap, but if that's their true North Star, and it's really not it's on the officials to enforce, right? But it's not necessarily on the officials because they're not calling it, because they're not being told to call it, and it's not part of their, mandate. What do you think about calling offensive penalties more to have them stop doing stupid things?
Well, the NFL's proven that they can take anything out of the game that they want to.
Yes.
We've learned that over the course of the year. Again, I referred back to the horse collar tackle as something that they said, we want that out of the game. And that's what they do. They penalize it initially because it hurts a team, but in the player safety aspect of it, they get the coaches to understand that that's not how we're going to play the game. So there's two parts of it. The third part, and to your point, is I'm not so sure that penalties are the answer, except when protocol, procedure, and diplomacy hasn't otherwise worked. In other words, why aren't there officials on the voting officials on the competition committee? Why are there not voting officials on the rules committee? The NFL says, well, we're going to let the quarterback slide. And did they ever ask an official, well, what happens if he gets hit in the head? What constitutes getting hit in the head? A little graze? I have to put his face mask back on. So we're never counseled as to what the impact of the rule is, any more than the cops are counseled on what city council says is now should be the speed limit, or what constitutes, giving a traffic ticket. The cops just ordered to go out and write tickets. It's like, well, we don't like the law, but that's the law, so we write a ticket. You put the officials basically in the same boat. So I think they can take out of the game whatever they want. I'm not opposed to penalties when they're necessary. We can't throw them just for the sake of throwing them because we don't like something. We have to be able to defend why we threw a flag. We can't just say, well, the offense hadn't had any penalties in the first quarter. They're about due. Well, no. But at the same time, I like that approach if there isn't compliance upstream, like I said, through policy, procedure, rules, or diplomacy. Then is it on the officials to, quote, fix that? Well, that's not our job to fix what we perceive to be a problem. The NFL has to recognize it as a problem. But if the NFL says, yeah, that's a problem and doesn't give us any other way to fix it, in other words, they just said, well, we want the horse collar out of the game, and so we want you to flag it forever. Well, then that's what we'll do. If the coach has decided, well, we're just going to keep teaching them to do that, well, then we're going to keep flagging it. So it's a collaborative effort to fix this. Unfortunately, that collaborative effort is missing a piece that I think would help some of this. So we get buried into the same discussion about rules and enforcement of rules. And should the refs fix problems that are perceived to be fixed? I don't know. Do we have full-time or part-time officials? What is it here that we're trying to fix? But those are all good discussions. And unfortunately, I like the fact that we're having those. I just wish they were having them in Park
upper
Avenue.
management.
And I'm not sure that I'm not sure that they are. The coaches don't want to have those conversations because they want fewer restrictions. They want to play ball. They want to hit somebody. They want to win a Super Bowl. Okay, great. But the commissioner's like, we can't have anybody with CTE, and God forbid we run out of Band-Aids because somebody has a hangnail. Well, I don't want to officiate that.
You brought up an interesting point that the refs have no say. So if you can change or make your own rule for the NFL, just one, what would it be if you can make any change?
Well, it wouldn't be the one that you think. But the first one that I would fix yesterday, and we're going to fix this in the ASFL, if there's an unsportsmanlike penalty after a score, 15 yards, we are not going to assess that on the kickoff.
Yeah,
that is a waste of time.
100%.
Next time that offense gets the ball, now we're going to back you up 15 yards.
The kickoff's a joke now, so
I'm not going to let the kicker kick off from the 50-yard line because that's a free penalty. Then that kicker's just going to kick it over the section 404. It's going to be in the parking lot. Yeah. It's like, there's no penalty for that. The penalty would be backing the offense up 15 yards after the change of possession. If we do away with kickoffs and they say, oh, well, you start at the 35 after a score, well, then we're gonna start you at the 20 because you had a sportsman. That'd be the first rule I would change. Are there others? Probably. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the fumble forward into the end zone being a touchback. And that should be a whole nother show, but I would argue against changing that rule because the people that want to change that rule say that's the dumbest rule in football. It's not. The end zone is a completely different enforcement area of the field because it's the end zone. It's where you score and take away scores, if you will. The two end zones are not in the field of play. The field of play is the 100 yards between the end zones. The end zone has a whole separate set of rules. You can't just say, if we fumble the ball through the end zone, that's not a safety. That should come back as out like any other fumble out of bounds. No, it went through the end zone. That's the other team's. So I don't get that one. I understand why they think it's a dumb rule, but it's not. The end zone has its own set of rules for a reason, and I would die on that hill to protect that. Unsportsmanlike after a score, yeah, we need to fix that one. Are there others?
I like it. I like
probably. You might have to give me some refreshers on some ones that are bugging you, and I'll tell you whether or not I would change them. But that one, those free penalty ones, wherever they occur, I would fix those. That may just be one example of a quote a free penalty. But anything where the other team would get basically a free 15 yards because you're going to assess it on the kickoff. I'm like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
And if they do away with kickoffs, what are they going to do? Yeah. How will you, if they do away with kickoffs, how are they going to enforce an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty after a score? No one has said how they're going to do that. Oh, well, they'll probably do it by backing the offense up. Well, gee, maybe we should have been doing that all along. I don't know.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, I think that's fair. Well, Ref, I want to thank you for joining the show. We have hit the end of our time and coverage. It's been a great discussion, and obviously there's probably another 2 hours or more of content to cover, because I mean this impacts every game, and it impacts every
People's
game,
lives and paychecks too.
Every team.
lives, paychecks. A well officiated game. A well officiated game is a pleasure to watch as a fan and a fanalist on the other end, and a really, really poorly officiated game can just absolutely drive you up a wall.
It ruins your week.
And it just like it ruins everything and all that sort of thing. And I'm sure that even as from your position, that's again, fair game as a comment. I think that would be a fair comment there to make. Love to have you back on the show for future comments. Really, really love having your insight from that other vantage point that is just so often missed. And ladies and gentlemen, if there's any questions that we missed and you think that you didn't like what we said and you want to tell us why, you think that I am now wrong, that I don't want full-time officials in the NFL, I am more than prepared to stand my ground on that front. You can leave those comments down below. You can reach us on X. You can also find Ref Guru. If you just put an @ symbol in front of that name there in StreamYard, you can find him there quite soundly on X. And it's been honestly, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. And
I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Come back at some point.
I appreciate that very much. That means a lot.
Brother.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I love you guys. I love your show. I've always loved your content. Keep up the good work. If I can contribute, I'd be happy to do that. Grateful for your friendship and your willingness to let me come on and speak my mind. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Ref.
I appreciate it, guys. And until next time, where the West Side's the best side. Peace.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my lifestyle. Wait a minute,